welcome everybody to this panel discussion and very interesting one. Um, Mr. Sanjay Roy will be hosting this panel discussion on the topic of impact of culture, impact of cinema on the culture and ethos of India. India itself is a rich cultural heritage. We are as diverse as the world. So I think this can be one of the best topics that to be discussed, and that too among eminent Bollywood writers, artists, actors. Let's take it ahead. Sanjay ji, I hand over this to you, and after you finish, we'll wrap it up for a minute in the end. I'll talk a few things about culture cinema at that point in time, not now. Please take it ahead.
Thank you so much, Praveen, and congratulations on putting this conference and conclave together. It's extremely important to look at the cultural context in India. And thank you to UNICEF and all the partners who are involved in this particular conference, and welcome to all our audiences. Please do send in your questions through the 1 hour to Praveen, and then he can send it to me via chat, and I will ask our wonderful speakers today some of those questions. Very quickly, we've got with us Nasreen Munni Kabir, all the way from London. Nasreen is a writer, curator, producer, and I've known Nasreen for many, many years. Many of you may not know, but she has been curating BBC's series of Indian films for 33 odd years prior to this. She's written a number of seminal books on film personalities, etc., which we've had the pleasure of hosting. She's also produced what became a seminal documentary on Shah Rukh Khan, but a number of other documentaries as well. We have Nandita Das, actor, director, and she doesn't like to use the word activist. She asked us to remove it in a sense, but also writer. She directed Firak, as many of you know. She's been an award-winning actress, acting in both films in India as well as international films. She's seen to be the thinking actor of Indian cinema in many ways. Adil Hussain, again, actor, award-winning actor. Adil, congratulations on your latest award that you won from Norway earlier this year. Adil has also won a number of films, a number of awards, national awards in India, and welcome to the show. Adil is also, for those of you who don't know, primarily wedded to theater. That is his love in many ways. Cinema is part of that experience. And we have Ambassador Vikas Swarup, writer. Many of you will know him as the writer of Q&A, what was made into the award-winning Slumdog Millionaire. He's also written a number of other books, and we will speak to him about those, about these also being made into films or series for the OTT platform. Ambassador Swarup has just recently retired as Secretary West, the Government of India, Ministry of External Affairs, and we are hoping that now that he's retired, he will be spending much more time in writing not just his books, but also screenplays, for the world and for us. Munni, I'm going to start with you. Sitting all the way in London as you did, when you first started curating the Channel 4 series on Bollywood, what was it like then, and what was the impression that audiences had about Bollywood? Who were the people who watched it then? And 33 odd years later, how do you see that having transformed the cultural space? Munni, you're on mute.
Okay, now I'm on. Sanjoy, it's a very interesting history because it actually, nothing happened for years. Obviously, we all know Indian cinema started way back over 100 years, but it actually was, whenever Indian films were shown in the West, and in particular in the UK, it was basically for the Asian Indian.
Sorry, one sec, Munni, we're getting an echo. Praveen, can you? I think you need to go. You need to get everything on mute.
I will mute all.
Yes, please.
And
Yep.
Is that, yeah, that could be better now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, it took a very, very long time for people in the West to actually open their mind to Indian popular cinema. Since the 50s, there was a small amount of people interested in world cinema who looked to Indian films like Satyajit Ray or to some extent Ritik Ghatak, but it was very, very small numbers. In the 80s, I would say Channel 4 was very instrumental as well because we showed Indian films there, but it was basically for the Asians, for Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis, and many people from North Africa and the Middle East who loved Indian films. The turning point in the West, or rather in Europe, was in the year 2000s when various things happened at the same time. You had Devdas being shown, Sanjay Leela Bhansali's version at Cannes. Then you had Andrew Lloyd Webber's preparing Bombay Dreams, the musical. Then you had Lagan that was nominated for an Oscar. And so virtually you had a kind of a Bollywood, the word, which I don't like at all, but it became a password to as if you understand Indian film, but it was just the password. You didn't go beyond the password. And the vast majority of audience, even today, actually are people who are either really involved with India in another way, but I would not say the same audience who would see a James Bond is going to go and see a subtitled Hindi film. That is not really the reality. However, the influence of Indian cinema has permeated other aspects of cultural life in the West, in music, in fashion, in a kind of another understanding and a more, I would say, contemporary connection to India. Before it was a kind of an exotic India image, but now it became much more contemporary. And for example, the Khan has shown Indian films regularly. Nandita's film was there. Adil's film was there. Adil is known to audiences, maybe even more because of Life of Pi, to be very frank. Now, so that there is a change in the audience and the reaction, but it is still minority in many ways.
Because Nasreen Kabir talks about minority. Now, you've traveled the world and recently you were in Russia. I remember when we started the festival in South Africa way back in the early 2000s, India was not necessarily a sexy word. Hindi cinema or Bollywood cinema certainly wasn't sexy either. But today that's changed. And even if you were to walk through the bazaars of Cairo or the markets in Turkey or in Russia, the erstwhile understanding of the Amitabh Bachchans and the Devanands and the Dilip Kumars, I mean, it was a completely different sense of being. How have you seen Indian cinema impact not just the diasporic audiences, but really mainstream understanding of India? Vikas, you're on mute.
I think Indian cinema has played a very important role in the way the world perceives India. I mean, cinema in general has been a prism through which we look at other cultures and other cultures look at us. And because cinema has been the single most important mass medium of communication, obviously its impact has been much more. You yourself mentioned how Awara, for instance, is a household term in countries ranging from Russia to China to Turkey. In my first posting in Turkey, everybody used to sing Awara Hu. In South Africa, where because of apartheid, you know, the Indian diaspora could not really connect with India. Their only source of cultural nourishment were the bootleg prints from India that made their way to the shores of Durban. And similarly, in modern day, if you see this amazing success that Lagan had in China, for instance, the way people go crazy over Amitabh Bachchan or Shah Rukh Khan in Egypt, you know, all this shows you that there is a world beyond Hollywood. And that if there is any challenger to Hollywood, it is the Indian film industry. Like Nasreen, Munni, Kabir, I also hate the term Bollywood. But the fact of the matter is, this is a beast that we have to live with. This is a term that has now become almost universal. And I have seen how the face of Indian cinema has changed, when alternative cinema came, with which Nandita, of course, has been very closely associated, how that shaped certain perceptions about the kind of social issues that India was grappling with. And then towards the 2000s, with Lagan and other movies coming in, I think the perception changed completely. And one big role, I think, was played by Slumdog Millionaire. There's certainly no doubt about it, because till then, as Nasreen said, Indian cinema was seen as catering only to a very niche audience, the diaspora communities and those who had interest in Indian culture, spirituality, yoga, etc. But then this became a mainstream film, which won the Oscar. And suddenly there was recognition for Indian talent, beyond the appeal to the diaspora. And A.R. Rahman, as you know, after Slumdog, went on to score, music for a number of Hollywood films. Dev Patel is now an international star, no longer confined to an Indian image. Same goes for, the whole lot of other technicians such as Resul Pukati, etc., who got name and fame because of Slumdog. And I think that has added to the changing image of India. I always make one point. A very good film about India also came out called Salam Bombay. But that film came out, I think, in 1988 or 89. And it won the Best Picture at Cannes, but did not make waves beyond that. Why? Because that was not the moment of India. India's moment started after our economic liberalization program. And Slumdog came at a time when there was global hunger for news about India. People were curious about this country. Why is it growing as 8 to 9%? What makes it tick? And I think Slumdog, in a way, contributed to satisfying that global hunger about India. It was also the right film for the right time. It was Charles Dickens for the 21st century, the right film for a globalized, multicultural world. And I think that's why it struck such a chord with the entire world. I mean, Jai Ho became the global anthem for quite some time. And since then, of course, it has opened the door to many other cross-cultural productions, many other films with similar themes, such as Lion, for instance.
I'm going to come back to, of course, Slumdog Millionaire in a second, because Nandita, Vikas talked about the impact across the world. Coming back to India, Indian cinema's impact on Indian society. Earlier, it was defined by, say, Amar Akbar Anthony for everything that it represented. Today, it's not that. Today, it's a much more unipolar sort of look in terms of what is possible, what is not. If you look at the protests that have increased manyfold against a number of films that have been released, whether it was Padmavat for all the wrong reasons, or Tandav, again, for what we may say is a wrong reason. But that seems to be the defining new language that cinema is pursuing. And yet people like you have continued to plow in many ways that lonely path. And Vikas used the word alternative. Alternative, of course, became mainstream about 15 years ago. It wasn't anymore the alternative cinema. How do you see cinema's impact today on Indian culture, and how do you see India's new belief in itself, or its new belief in its new ideology, on its ancient ideology, but new interpretation of that ideology reflected in cinema? You're on mute. You're on mute, Nandita.
Sanjoy, that's a very complex question and deals with many, many aspects. I don't know if, just to rephrase part of that question, whether alternate cinema became mainstream. I think alternate cinema just kind of, in this new economic boost, or what Mr. Swarup also spoke about, it kind of just went away, just fizzled out. Earlier, that's why we had something called the parallel cinema and the mainstream cinema. And then new words started coming in, like, multiplex cinema, middle of the road cinema, where I think economics also started interfering with art much more. With all the freedom that we have with the OTT platforms and this and that, many of the films that were possible earlier are not being made. In a strange way, and I might sound like I'm saying something which is counterintuitive, that a lot of the films right from Do Bigha Zameen to, to Sujata, to a lot of these Bimal Roy, Guru Dutt films, there was no mainstream and alternate terminology at that time, because it had romance, it had songs, it had emotions, it had politics. The common man, so to say, man, woman, were very much center stage. You even had the angry young man and the coolie, the rickshawala, the farmer. They could be protagonists. Somewhere along the line, I think, like in societies, after all, cinema is only a reflection of society. We are not really concerned with that person. It doesn't matter. Today, if a film is doing well in our outside the NRI market, if it's doing well in the A-list circles, which is big cities, in the multiplexes where you can push back your seats and they're priced very high with the popcorn and food coming in between the film, it doesn't really matter whether the villager or the common person is really watching it or not. So things have changed a lot, and also OTT platforms has changed it. What is a hit film? As long as it does reasonably well and has a marketing hoopla, and then if it goes on to the OTT, it's fine. And that has really eliminated a lot of those protagonists. But that's happened to our media as well. Our newspapers, the rural pages have all just started vanishing. So I also acted at a time when there was not that much of there was hardly any social media, actually. Much of my work that I did, and while it was in its small silos, a Malayalam film or a Bengali film or whatever, it went to the festival, did okay in its own state. There was no scope really to put it on these OTT platforms where you could see it with subtitles. That was really a different era. Now we are up against a lot of things, many more other language films that are part of the OTT platform. So this Indianness, the impact of it on this India, the India is also constantly changing and evolving with so many other different impacts that in a strange way, the cinema is getting narrower. Even what we call a slightly alternate film is actually very mainstream. It's very difficult for a Manikal or a Kumar Shahani to even be born in these times and make a film. A lot of the films that Adil and I probably enjoy really doing is still watched by few people. And while there might be one or two examples of such cinema doing well, there are hundreds of those scripts that don't even make it into a film. So it sounds a little bit pessimistic. And with the censorship that you talked about, are we able to really speak our mind? If art is not allowed to have the freedom to speak its mind, and it doesn't mean you have to agree or disagree, but then obviously it's going to take a beating, because that means anything that's a little bit risque or anything that questions anything that's a status quo, obviously if it's not going to find a voice, then you're going to homogenize or make it more mainstream.
Would you be able to make Firak today?
Unlikely. But would I be able to even make Fire, despite the fact that there is more conversation about LGBTQ issues, Earth, or so? I mean, one will have to find different ways of telling the stories. And I think it's simultaneous. There are more people who are also speaking their mind, and the social media is not all bad. There are many people who are able to voice it, and movements have gained a certain momentum, but it's kind of 2 steps forward, 2 steps backwards. There is a lot of simultaneity of different things happening, and it depends which side of the fence you are on, or which is your little silo. Which silo do you belong to? Social media is also an echo chamber. We always listen to our kind of people and feel good or bad about what's going on. So these are complex times, and sometimes it's unfortunate that those complexities we are not being able to bring out in our cinema, because cinema has such an amazing way of subliminally impacting how we think, how we respond, how we behave, how we feel. So if these complexities could find their ways into stories, it would be great. And not all is lost. I mean, there is still an Ib Ale U. I don't know if you've seen that film, which is a wonderful small film, but really amazing. I saw it a few months ago, and I urge everyone to kind of find it. And, and there are many such smaller films with newer directors. Tithi was one. And, there are many of those smaller films that are trying to sort of still survive and really hope that they find more audiences.
I mean, it'll be interesting to know how you all view Lunchbox. Is it mainstream? Is it alternate? But I'll come back to you on that in a second. Adil, Nandita talked about the narrowing of space, and yet, like what Vikas said a little while ago, Slumdog Millionaire, in some ways, or Monsoon Wedding, in some ways, sort of opened up that market to actors from our part of the world. You are seen today much more to occupy that space internationally. A lot of the work that you've been doing recently has been in international cinema. Has that changed? Has that has the perception changed? Or are you still sort of doing stereotypical roles? Or are these challenging? Are these written into the script, not necessarily because India is this big new market into which you have to, Quantico to whatever, you have to have an Indian character so you can get an India release. How do you see the impact of cinema and on the societies that you've really performed? I mean, Norway's, the award, for example, the Amanda Award, for example, that's rare, right? First time for somebody not in the mainstream, or what I mean by mainstream is their kind of actors have got something like this. Adil, you're on mute.
Good question, Sanjoy. And I think that there are three things that have asked me. First one is that has the perception of the Western film industry, it's a Western film industry means it's a huge thing, like Scandinavia and American and the British industry, and of course other Western European film industries, especially English-speaking countries where Indians are slowly getting into the social fabric and the mainstream social fabric. The numbers are growing there, and the Indians are being recognized as a sort of a legitimate part of society in America. In the UK, it has been happening since a long time, but now more. As Swarupji also said, that slowly, because India has become, economic powerhouse. So we are being recognized more. In Norway, there are not many Indians or Pakistanis or Bangladeshis or Sri Lankan there, but it's a sizable community. And Norway also plays a very important role because as a democracy, it's a very inclusive democracy. And they made sure that all kinds of people are being incorporated into the art and culture area. And I think that's the government policy as well. Now also, I think someone will be able to put light on that more than me, that there are policies that all kinds of people from different communities should be represented in the film industry as well. And when I was recently cast to play a role in Star Trek, for example, so it is a mandate that they have followed as well. And I'm so glad that is happening. It's a complex situation. There's no one way to sort of pinpoint or answer that question. But I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I was nominated for the Amanda Award. I thought, oh, this is just a show off by the Norwegian government, to give an Indian at least a nomination. And when I went there to be at the award ceremony, and when they said I got the Best Actor award, it's a national award of Norway, and I was like, wow, this is quite something. I have nothing to do with Norway. I first time went to Norway just to shoot the film, and in contrast to that, an Indian film that I acted in, written by an Indian, a French citizen, but an Indian born and brought up in Shivaji Park in Bombay till he was 27 years old, went to Paris to study in La Fémis, in the film school there, and he wrote the film, directed the film, funded by half by NFDC, was not qualified for national award. It's a film set in Mumbai. It's an Indian family, a film on Indian family, but we were not qualified to for the national award because the director was a French citizen. So in contrast, Norwegian film industry and the government, they gave me a national award. So it also depends on the government policies as well, how they are trying to sort of make the society more inclusive in every possible way. In America also, slowly I have seen a lot of Indians are being cast in the series, in Netflix series and other OTT platforms, and which is very, very heartwarming to see that. Like our dear friend Purna Jagannathan, she is playing a huge role in a series called Sweet Tooth, and I was like, wow. So I think things are changing, and as Nandita said it very correctly, that it is probably possible to find a way to accept the social political condition as artists, because our job, probably this is very, very personal opinion, what art means to me. Our job is to bring people together. Of course, we need to stand up, but at the same time, that's in that standing up, the intent is not pushing the other person down, or it's not opposing for the sake of opposition. Of course, we don't do that, but to bring people together. And we have to find another language in today's time. And also we had similar situation before as well. I've seen so many films were banned, I have seen before. Books were banned, and we have found a way out to talk about it. And that particular language, cinematic language that we have to find, it has to come from a deep respect for each and every opinion. And that probably will happen. And as we evolve, how we start perceiving artistic activities. So I think there are hundreds of reasons which are impacting the perception of Indian cinema and Indian artists across the globe.
Because, Adil talked about socio-political issues which impact cinema. In more recent times, in fact, in your books, whether it's Six Suspects or Slumdog Millionaire, you really you make sure that you reflect Indian society with all of its scars for cinema. The question I'm asking is there a role that cinema has? Should cinema have a role? Is cinema's the only sort of primary role to entertain? How is this reflective of society?
Well, certainly nobody will agree that cinema's only role is to entertain. There is one type of cinema which we call masala cinema, whose job is to entertain. But Indian films, right from the beginning, have raised important social issues, whether it is female infanticide, whether it is dowry, whether it is now more recently LGBTQ issues. Even during the freedom movement, I think films played a very important role because they gave importance to the mythology of India. And they, in a sense, inculcated a sense of cultural nationalism among the people. And they were able to rise up against the imperialist forces who were ruling us at that time. So films have a very, very important role to play because, it's in India, it happens both ways. Films are a reflection of society, and films in turn influence society. I mean, we are probably among the only countries in the world where sometimes life mirrors art, as we have seen with the popularity of Lady Sangeet now in films. And also films have started also to show the aspirational aspect of the country. I don't know whether filmmakers like Nandita and Adil and Nasreen have noted this. In the past, till the 80s, I would say, or even till the 90s, the lead in a film used to be a police inspector. But now increasingly, I'm seeing the police inspector has given way to the ACP. Very few films now, I think, have inspectors as the main protagonists. They are generally ACPs or DCPs, They have gone up higher in rank. So films, I think, have a very important role. And the point that Adil made, I think, is very important. India is the most complex country on the planet, without a doubt. There is no other country which has the same level of, a stratification that we have in India. And no one film or one book can represent that reality in toto. And that is why it is very important that we have multiple voices chronicling the multiple realities that coexist in India at the same time, so that we get a totality of the picture. You just cannot say that there is only one perspective or there is only one kind of reality in India, because India lives in several centuries at the same time, let alone several time zones. So I think it's important that our films reflect the diversity, which is the staple of India, which is what India is known for. And I think that is the best way in which to promote creativity, because only when you have diverse voices speaking out, then only you can select the voices which you think appeal to you the most.
We have to get you to become part of the standing committee for I&B with the new minister, but we'll come back to that in a second. Nasreen, coming back, what Vikas said about film influencing society. I mean, look at the fact, and he talked about the Sangeet, whether it's now in a Malayalam wedding or a Bengali wedding or a traditional Tambram wedding, the Sangeet, as it's seen in Karan Johar film, is the thing to do. So when did Bollywood go from being ugh and not cool for most traditional, self-respecting Bhadralok families to sort of use that sort of nuance, to being so uber cool, ultra cool, where you not only have to have a Sangeet, but you have to wear what the heroine of the moment has worn in her Sangeet. What happened? What was the trajectory? What broke the dam?
Well, actually, if you look at the history of Indian cinema, in the 40s and 50s and into the mid-60s, the whole lot of Indians of all classes loved films. So you had a film like Madhumati or Mother India that would be an all India hit. And you could find that into the 70s and 80s, with the violent film with Mr. Bachchan and Salim Javed and so on, the middle classes started moving a little away from the big popular films and going towards the Rishikesh Mukherjee, Amol Palekar type of small middle class stories. Whereas the big audience was still with Mr. Bachchan, and with a certain violence about smugglers and the police, and everything was happening in those films. When they started going downhill, and the 80s, many people will admit it was the worst area of Indian cinema, because for me, the glue that keeps us connected to Indian films is its music and its songs. And if you take the 50s and you had those great lyricists like Sahir and Shailendra and Shakil Saab and all these people and the music directors, they were the ones who attached us to the cinema, because their songs were voicing our emotions. And we are all Indians, are very emotional. So the song there was always a song to describe our emotion. And that connection started waning in the 70s and 80s. Salim Javed films, despite the fact that Javed Saab came from a tradition of poetry, and we've discussed it with Javed Saab many times, his films did not have songs. There was no emphasis on music in Salim Javed films, only in some of Mr. Bachchan's films like Kabhi Kabhi, and that was Sahir Saab and Yash Chopra. So you have a situation where the mainstay of Indian film, which is the emotion and the songs and the music, is going. And then what you call the kind of gentrification. It was once I had interviewed Johnny Walker, and he said in the 50s, the car park used to be full, because they were the middle class who would come to the cinema. He said by the 70s, koi nahi tha udhar, because it went into the popular cinema, which Salman Khan is about the only hero now who's continuing that trend. So when did it become cool? I would honestly credit England. And one guy, a music guy, Bali Sagu, his name was, and he started remixing R.D. Burman songs. And he started, what's that song from Kurbani? Aap Jaise Koi Mil Jaye, that song. He remixed that, and that song and the Bhangra went into India. Now, people used to love Shami Kapoor, but they never danced to Shami Kapoor. It was the Bhangra stuff in the 90s. The music brought in the middle classes and the youth of the middle classes. And the crowning glory were the three Khans, starting with Amir, in Qayamat Se Qayamat Tak, Maine Pyar Kiya Salman, and then finally the hero of heroes, Shah Rukh Khan. So basically, the heroes who were our heroes, Dilip Kumar and Dev Saab and Raj Kapoor, and even Rajesh Khanna at a small period, were over. And it was young people wanting to see young people on screen. So the popular cinema then became very gentrified. And I think it came through the back door, and it was music that brought it in. That interest, if you look at the songs and the remixes that were going on, it was music, then the dancing, then the fashion, then the aspiration, then the Porsche, then the living and going for a picnic to Holland in the tulips or wherever. And now what has happened, I do believe, the audiences are getting fed up of that. So they are looking at the same middle class, educated classes are looking at web series, and they're looking at Netflix and Amazon. And the big popular, because of COVID, cannot go to the cinema. So the question really is, when the cinemas open, will there be an audience, the same audience for the Khans who have taken their place, which is happening right now? Will it be many heroes? But I would say you have to compare it to the 50s, how long Dilip Kumar, Raj Kapoor and Devanand ruled, and then the three Khans ruled. And now I don't believe any one star will rule. So basically, the gentrification is a long-winded answer, but the gentrification came first through music, then through the Khans, then through the polished look of the films, where Karan Johar, Adi Chopra, all these young directors, they were all under 25 when they made their first film, were connected to the youth. Their parents loved Dilip Kumar, but they didn't. They wanted to see themselves on the screen, and very rich selves. It wasn't the poor self. It was no longer Shambhu Mehto.
It was the NRI returning kid.
They always get it. They seem to blame it on the NRI, but the poor NRI, he had no say in what those films were. And we don't live like that. Those houses you see in Dilwale or any of those films, my God, nobody lives like that. I don't think the Queen of England lives like that.
Nandita, Nasreen talked about young people going to the cinema, and of course the age of the hero has now passed us. If you look at the new series like the Patal Loks of the world, which became so very popular, or Vikram Chandra's series that came into its own, you talked about not being able to make, say, a fire today. But young people are very occupied with these larger themes of sexuality, of migration, of identity, of the very essence of being, which is the reason why much of the series that you see today across cinema, across the OTT platforms, are getting enormous audiences. As Nasreen said, when cinemas reopen, and in some cities, even as we speak, Bangalore, for example, is going to reopen next week or next month. How do you see this? Will you see a change of what people have been educated by in this 1.5 years of being locked down? Will it go back to same old, same old? Will you see this change? And again, in terms of women, more and more women directors are creating wonderful pieces of art and cinema from a woman's perspective, not necessarily which condones any kind of violence or moves away from the male gaze, but it's different. It has been, it's essentially a different kind of cinema. Does that have a place, especially in this OTT platform, in the smaller screens, etc.? Has the audiences, you feel, become more educated?
Well, I don't see much of OTT or films, so I don't know if I'm the right person to answer. But I mean, definitely there is a lot more choice now. It's not only about Indian films. Malayalam films and Tamil films are also being watched on OTT that we could never do earlier. When I did an Adur Gopalakrishnan film, it remained in Kerala and went to Toronto Film Festival and a couple of other festivals, and it died, right? So that is definitely changing. You're seeing some of the best American and the English series. But when we talk about youth, which youth are we also talking about? As Mr. Swarup said, India is so stratified and so varied that is it the urban youth? Within the urban youth, is it the affluent youth? That's, on Instagram, maybe posting their coffee and their ring and their life, or is it the village youth or the town youth? They're all watching similar things, but yet their realities are very different. So we'll have to see what, when things open up, what is really going to take up. Also, the larger question is, after this pandemic is over, we are often asking ourselves, are we going to go back to the same old thing? Have we really learned anything? And the more realistic side sort of makes you feel that no, I don't think we've learned so much, because even with that slight opening, everybody's kind of out there honking away, no care for nature, world. It feels like we haven't learned anything. And at the same time, we all philosophize when someone closer, especially in the second wave, we all knew someone who had succumbed to COVID. And it felt like, oh my God, this is really a time for reflection. But it's yet to be seen whether that's going to change. I know that when I speak to producers, let's say about films, everyone is talking about, we need young people film, we need happy films, make hopeful films. People have gone through so much and they don't want to be seeing something depressing. And in fact, they are not even talking about people have gone. Which people are they even talking about? Often they are talking about people like you and me, whose lives are still continuing. We can still live reasonably comfortably. We still have some help. We are still eating the same food, etc. So while this whole migration in the first wave kind of choked us, and we felt a deep sense of guilt, and just the idea of staying home, staying safe, had its own ironies with domestic violence increasing. I don't know how much of it have we really internalized, because if we have, then the filmmakers would want to tell those stories, and then we would not be saying that, oh, I want to escape the tension that the anxieties I've gone through in this year and a half, and I just want to see happy films. I would want to say that, I've gone through anxieties, but maybe there are others who've gone through more. And I really want to know what people have felt and thought. And, so we really have to see. And, you had earlier asked Mrs. Swarup about the fact that the role of cinema, is it to entertain? I've always kind of resisted that word, because what might entertain somebody may not entertain me at all. So it's not even that one is trying to shun the films that are entertaining. They actually do not entertain me. And there's no judgment on that. My films may not engage another person, but I would want to use the word engaging. Does cinema engage? And, you also asked about what's really the role of cinema. There is no one role. It can be, because all of us need different things maybe from cinema. But I do think that a film, if it can have some kind of a social conscience, which doesn't mean social issues, it doesn't have to be a messagey film. In fact, the films that are very messagey are terribly boring and high-handed and preachy. And I get a lot of those because people perceive me a certain way and they think that that's the story I'm going to like. And, it's your kind of a film. It's a feminist film, which means the woman kills the villain at the end. And I'm like, please, that is definitely not feminism. And I don't want a film that has a message, but a film that has a social conscience, that is in some way, like Adil said, is bringing us closer, is asking maybe uncomfortable questions, is making us think and feel in a different way. Maybe it's just showing us a mirror. No film can really create a revolution. Greater, bigger films have come and gone. So, like, who are we to say any of that?
We watched the film of Mr. Modi, but we'll keep that for a different time. Adil, Nandita talked about, in many ways, films being far more empathetic. If you looked at Silsila, Silsila brought the affair out in public, in an acceptable space. So did the songs sort of reflect on that. You fast forward to Tiffin Box, which I referred to earlier. which brought about the empathetic nature of a relationship. Is empathy the new cool? In many ways, reflecting what Nandita talked about.
I wish, sorry.
You're on mute.
For me, it's the fundamental ingredient of artistic pursuit, empathy. To be able to completely, not necessarily to agree, but to embody and to understand and to empathize. I think this aspect in the artistic pursuit, especially in filmmaking, like in any good novel, any good story, we always see all kinds of points of views, and which I am constantly seeing in OTT platforms, especially which are made well-written ones. I'm watching something called right now, The Handmaid's Tale. It's a story set in America. America has been taken over by the right-wing Christian fanatics, and then what happens? But I'm also seeing their perspectives and trying to understand and making me completely empathize with each and every character. Like any good, probably any art which I am drawn to is to be able to see multiple perspectives coming from their personal belief system, and which are valid. And as a practitioner of art, while I did theater, Othello, for example, you had taken Othello to different parts of the world with us. When I played Othello, I killed Desdemona, for God's sake. But people come and shake my hands that, oh, you did so well. I think that opened also my idea of what art could be, that I can actually bring people to my side and make them see the world. And this should be, if it is not, like Nandita briefly came and said, I wish that was the case. I think it is becoming the case with new writers coming in, and quite a lot of scripts I get from all kinds of places, from all kinds of filmmakers through Twitter DM and Facebook Messenger and Instagram DM. I kept them open because I don't have a PR machinery working for me. Neither I have an agent here in India. So I get all kinds of scripts, and I'm seeing amazing scripts written by very, very young people, and I keep giving them notes. But before even they immediately understand, okay, sir, I understand now what you mean. So there is but it's drop in the ocean. It's not in the mainstream consciousness, but there is a huge possibility that it is changing. And evolution, as we all know, is a slow, unfortunately painful process. So we are evolving, and I hope we do faster. But
because Adil said, bring people to our side. The quasi-historical big set films that we are seeing, more mythological than historical, being passed off as history. What is the impact of that on the polity as you see it? We are seeing many more of them again and again and again, these hugely fictionalized historical characters sort of, is it creating a sense of uber nationalist Indianism? And is that what we are seeing in terms of bring people to our side?
I think it is more in terms of, these very large, complex narratives of the kind of that we saw with the Lord of the Rings, for instance. For a long time, I think we were searching for our own narratives beyond Ramayana and Mahabharata, because they have been done to the death. And I think partly Bahubali, in a way, met that demand. It was an entirely Indianized, fictionalized, mythological version in a completely fictional universe. But it catered to the need for having an Indian mythological ecosystem, so to speak. And now I think you are seeing, when writers like Amish, etc., are writing, they are creating a sense of, again, a sense of cultural nationalism, in figures which are rooted in Indian history. presented in a very different way from what people had been used to in the past. And that will become a genre in its own, has become a genre in its own. And I think you will see more and more films also, coming out on that particular, on those particular themes. But even those, I think we need to, if we are indeed going to have the full creative freedom to explore everything, then we can think of, something which is set in the future, for instance. Or we could see, an angle where these people came from the past, they came from an alien race, for instance. So my sense is that these are opening up a whole new channel again for Indian filmmakers to experiment with, because in the past we never had science fiction fantasy, but now we are having science fiction fantasy as well. So to me, the more the merrier. The more we have these different voices exploring different genres, the more choice the viewer has. And as Nandita ji said, and as Adil said, now with the OTT platform, you are spoiled for choice. So you will only see something which you connect with instantly. That quality of empathy, you have to relate to a central character. Now that character could be from mythology, that character could be from history, or that character could be from fiction.
Nasreen, again, taking from what Vikas said, co-productions have been around forever. It's Slumdog Millionaire wasn't necessarily the first one, neither was Salam Bombay. They've been around forever. What influence have these co-productions had in cinema in India today? I mean, there's been very few co-productions that sort of has missed your notice or hasn't come through you in some way for your ideas or suggestions. How is that shaped what we're seeing currently?
Are you talking about the impact in India or outside India of these?
I'm talking about the impact in India. How is it impacted Indian cinema? Whether it's The Road,
yes.
for example.
Yes, I would say the co-productions, for some reason, the Indian audience have been quite hesitant to accept embracefully. Salam Bombay did well, you know that. I think Slumdog did well, but within the industry, there was a lot of talk and negative talk about it. And also the thing is that, you see, on one hand, people would like Indian cinema to be more present, but they want it to be made entirely by Indians. So that the fact is Danny Boyle, a white man, directing, worked against it for Indian audiences. Well, it worked for everywhere else, because Danny Boyle is a big name. So you see that you cannot please all audiences at the same time. And often you would find that even the lunchbox that you referred to, people thought it was made for Europe because the sensibilities were not Indian. So how do you define Indian sensibilities? Because as Vikas ji said, they are so diverse. We are not one group. But the fact of the matter is, what I see really happening is some co-productions, some indies, they will cater to like-minded audiences, frankly. And the big popular film in the West will also cater to the mass audience. If you see a James Bond film in London, it will cater to everybody. But if you see a film by Ken Loach, it will cater to a few. So in fact, we have to always see that the audience are not fools. They know what they want. You're asking them to spend money and go and see a film. They will see the film they want to see. They will see the film that appeals to them. And they have that right. They have that right everywhere in the world. And so I think co-productions, coming back to your original question, co-productions don't have mass appeal. There were co-productions even in the 50s between Russia and India, a film called Pardesi with Nargis, and Nargis is a big star, but it did not appeal because it's trying to please two groups and they cannot be pleased together. If you are rooted in your culture and you have a universal theme, the theme has to be universal, not the detail. If the detail is intrinsically Korean or Indian or Irani, it will appeal to the West. If you try and make a film that the detail is for Europe, it will not please anybody. And the other thing that I think a mistake that's being made is that people feel that if an Indian film is made in English, it will appeal. It is absolutely the reverse. It is the Hindi film with subtitles because subtitles are accepted and that appeals. That is why I think Satyajit Ray had this this great appeal. Even today, he's the only director because he would have a sense of the detail, very, very Bengal, but it would have a universal appeal of childhood, coming of age, the loss of the death of the old lady. It had universal themes. And I think co-productions that try to please both will please no one.
And
and
that's the reason why Suitable Boy didn't work.
You mean in terms of television?
In
I don't
terms
know
of
how.
India.
I don't know how the audiences in India really saw it, but
They
I
didn't.
think if Suitable Boy was made in Hindi, I think it would have done much better. Hindi from the start, not as a dub. It is really to do with language and expression is the emotion, and emotion is actually culturally and nationally defined. A French person's emotions, he cannot express it in German. And therefore, I think the connection between emotional expression and language is very important.
Nandita, emotion, expression, and language. Mental health today is one of the biggest
Totally.
in India. It's really a ticking time bomb, and we're seeing that. Whether it's the number of suicides that we're seeing during the pandemic era that we're going through, or otherwise. Really, 2 or 3 films have only addressed that, whether it's Galiyo Pe, Galiyo Mein, or to some extent Aligarh, to some extent the mental makeup of your characters in Iraq. Do you see this to be a possibility in the future, that films will look at mental makeup in a much more detailed and important way than we're seeing right now?
I think it's part of the story, isn't it? I mean, you're asking me all these academic questions almost, Sanjoy. Not
It's
sure
an
how I'm
academic
supposed to
panel.
know. I'm just telling you what I feel. But I think unless a film is specifically about a mental health issue, uh, the mental health or the characterization is very much part of a story. It's the choices you make when you say, this is the story I want to tell, and I want to be true to the characters. I want to be true to what they are going through. Like a Peoply Live, it had a different genre, but it wanted to talk about the problems that farmers went through. There's another Marathi film, I forget the name, which talks about the farmer suicide, but in a very serious and a very sort of deep way. And this is another take. So I think mental health, as long as we care about people, and when we say we, as in filmmakers and filmmakers who come from the same society that we all live in, as long as the writer, the filmmaker, the actors, the producer, we forget the producer, which is where the buck stops. Often they are the ones who are calling the shots. So when there is a common sort of a collective concern, which is probably never going to happen as a phenomena, there will always be a few people here and there who will care and who will struggle and tell these stories. But if as a society, as a community, we often say, why doesn't the film industry do this? It's not a cohesive body. It's not it's not something that actually comes together for things or stands up against something or even creates policies or whatever. But if that was to happen, then then maybe things would change. Now it's very individual dependent. If I'm going to do a film, let's say Firak, for instance, and I will then create those characters because I want to create those nuances. And talking of language, in Firak, there were people who spoke in Gujarati. There were, the more affluent Muslims would speak differently, but a rickshawala Muslim would speak completely a different language. There would be a mix of an upper middle class person would mix Gujarati and English. So it depends on who is speaking what. And language is not just a language. It's an expression of how you really feel. It's a window into a culture. So to answer your question, I think it will again go back to the intent with which films are made. And as long as we can have some purity of intent, I think we will be able to bring out those nuances.
I'm going to also take some audience questions because we're sort of headed to the last thing. Are there 2 thoughts for you? One is that, are we intrinsically a happy culture? All our films must have a happy ending. And as Nandita said, everybody has been saying, we must have a happy film, not a sad film, as opposed to European cinema, French cinema, which is far darker, set in one room and at the end everybody has to kill themselves. or kill each other. So are we a happy culture? That's one. And Kamal A. Nasir asked, Indian cinema has trivialized the aesthetics and sensibility of viewers with few exceptions. Not much originality, only sequels and remakes.
Well, I think we are. I think we are in a way. Like when, from my personal experiences, when I travel a lot. I have crisscrossed the country on my motorbike for 2, 3 years, and I've seen and I fell in love with India. And after that, my first European travel. Before that, I went to study in the UK, and I saw how also as it's very important to say this first, that there's no judging here at all. Climatic conditions, so many different conditions. Anthropologically, if you look at any society, their emotional makeup is a consequence of all kinds of things. It's a very complex thing. But in India, when I traveled across the country, and I have traveled from the metro to the urban and semi-urban and village and tribal villages, to the point I was in a village for 3, 4 months where they haven't till then seen a matchbox or a lighter or money, or there's no question of car. And so in these this amazing landscape that I traveled, I have seen a common theme, which is there is a inherent wisdom that we possess. I don't know where it comes from and how is it possible. There are so many explanations I have read by the mystics of India, but I'm not sure, because those are stories to me, because it cannot be proved. So there is an inherent tendency to of just smiling. Even people, those who are begging on the streets, the kids, the face is very grim, but if you tickle them a little bit, and which I do, tickle in a sense, not physically, but to smile, and they just burst into a smile. But at the same time, when I lived in Europe, in Amsterdam, I was there for 3.5 years in Holland, and it's very difficult for a lot of people to smile, even having all kinds of luxurious, which we call luxury here, is very commonplace there. All kinds of things that you want to have in a house. So I think, yes, there is a sense of contentment, which is sort of a benchmark, and then beyond that, probably for God knows what reason, we want to aspire, we want to go ahead in the evolutionary ladder. And the second question that you asked me about the Indian, I think this sense of aesthetics is a very, very, again, subjective. At the same time, I do miss in most of the films. If I want to be honest, in most of the films, I miss a sense of just general aesthetics about human, just normal things. How you say the language which are being used nowadays in OTT platforms. Also, I see that it's very trivial and lack taste. But for me, art is something that which will create a sense of aesthetics, which will help people aspire for a better way of looking at life. And that I don't see happening in the bulk of the films that I see. And the last thing I want to point out, Sanjay, there's a wonderful, my teacher said something, that the vultures are extremely, extremely skillful. They can detect from the high height, what is going on down there. They're very skillful, but they're looking at the lower depths of humanity. That's we have amazingly skillful filmmakers and directors and producers. As Nandita said, I have nothing to say. They have to really do a lot of workshops on what they can do. So we look at the lower depths of humanity instead of helping or creating something which people will aspire for. It is very difficult to create those kind of films or piece of art. Life of Pi is one of the examples that without having any star, without having any star apart from Ang Lee, but Ang Lee's other movies didn't do well as well, like the last film he made. It didn't do well, but that film, brought everything together. So it needs a lot of hard work and the purity of intent, as Nandita mentioned, to do something which is beautiful, and that defines art for me.
Let me quickly, the last question, because Praveen is sort of agitating, we need to stop. Because do you think that people, Akira asked, do you think the idea that people have of India affects the performance of a film in international markets? Say Slumdog Millionaire fits the West perception of India. Can a film that does not focus on certain social issues associated with India do well? And Ambassador Pinak Chakravarti is asking, when are you writing your next thriller?
I think if you come to a film with a preconceived notion of a particular country, then a good film is one which breaks that preconceived notion and makes you look at that country in fresh ways. Before Slumdog, the general sense in the West of films about India was films about the Raj. You had to show palaces and Maharajas and elephants and polo and stuff like that. But then you had a gritty film exploring the underbelly of urban India. And that, in a sense, changed the perception of the West. It was no more about the colonial India, and it was about the modern dynamic India. And even though, as I said, the film received a lot of criticism, as Nasreen ji said, some people called it poverty porn. But at the end, I think the film was really about the dynamism of the slum kids, their resourcefulness, their ingenuity, and above all, their ability to rise above their environment and actually become winners. So from that point of view, I think, it really broke stereotypes about India, and it allowed people to look at India in fresh ways. And I think the same thing happens with now regional cinema. As Nandita ji mentioned, now because of OTT, we are able to watch serials made in Malayalam and Tamil and Telugu and Assamese and all the regional languages. And that is also allowing us to appreciate those cultures. As Adil said, the job of cinema, especially a mass medium like cinema, is to bring people together. And in a sense, we are all being brought together in this common marketplace called Netflix and Amazon, and now Disney also, by these OTT platforms. But at the end of the day, people will bring their own prejudices to what they are seeing. And if they continue to see the film through the prejudices that they have, through the stereotypes they have, through the mindset they have, then that may not be the best viewing experience that they will get. But if you watch a film with an open mind, be prepared to be surprised, be prepared to, be curious, to have wonder, then I think you can get a surprise from a truly well-made film.
Nasreen, quick last question. How tolerant, this is from Avinash Kumar, how tolerant are people towards graphic violence on screen?
Well, now I think people are a bit tired of it, and they are very tolerant, but unfortunately the gaming world has a lot of violence, and so kids are used to seeing a lot of violence, and they don't get surprised by it. But I would say films are not really that as violent as they used to be, but they are really very different films being made in India, and that's what's exciting. And when people talk about when Adil mentioned the lack in some way of aesthetics in films, I really do feel that when we look back at the old movies in the 50s, and you saw Bimal Roy or Mehboob Saab or Gurudat or Raj Kapoor, Kedar Sharma, you saw that aesthetic because they were rooted in the culture, they were rooted in the language. I think the biggest problem has been the English in a way. English has confused everybody, and there are no good writers. The screenplays are not well written. Salim Javed with the last, major rooted in Indian culture type of screenplay writers. But today they are a little bit confused, and they are taking from other films. They're not taking from life. And there's a big difference. If you live something and you see it and you think you understand it, is very different, Sanjoy. It's like us meeting on Zoom. It would be much, much better to give you a hug rather than see you on a screen.
Totally. Adil, Hussain, Nandita Das, Nasreen, Munni,
Mhm.
Kabir, Vikas, Swarup, thank you all so much for this fascinating conversation. We could have, needless to say, carry on because anyway we carry on whenever we meet. And I know we could have done so, but over to Praveen and thank you all for watching. And
Thank
Praveen,
you.
again, congratulations on making this possible. It's so difficult today to get something started. You've been able to do that. So more strength to you. And I hope issues like this find more place, even if it is in focus groups as you have put together today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you.
I'm grateful to all of you for being a part of this. In fact, we had two conversations of similar kind in the afternoon, and I'm pleasantly surprised that the similar thoughts were emerging from different bunch of people. So there was a section of OTT, and then there was a section of panel discussion on music, where we talked about that art government should let artists be artists, let them speak their mind. That is something which will allow the culture to grow and prosper, and something similar is coming out of from here. Then this cross-cultural concept of Indian film, Indian artists, Indian producers awarded by Norway, which means the cinema has a universal language. So that's another interesting thing. So idea of our festival is to bring cultural aspects to highlight and see how through cinema we can use the cultural aspects and bring the people together across the world. And that's with the thought process we started this small unique concept based festival. We've got in the current festival we have 74 films as a part of official selection from 21 countries, 16 languages, truly international representation. And they're not all features. There are some of them are features. There are some very good documentaries. There are some shorts. We also had a very specific category for super shorts. So 30 seconds to 5 minutes, and some of them are beautiful expressions, creative expressions in those 2 minutes and 3 minutes. So I think it's about how you express yourself and how you do the storytelling. You really can reach out to a large number of people and a diverse audience, and use the diversity itself to bring them closer. So that's what we would like to promote, and hope that this whole concept of a universal brotherhood grows, and in the humanity itself, for the survival and existence of humanity. I think all this is very important. I hope more of you people will be joining us in the coming days. We'll keep getting support. It's a small first step of a long journey. I hope we'll meet more frequently in the coming days with more similar kind of events. And with this, I just want to say thank you, everybody. I want to express my gratitude to all of you for being here. And that's how I would like to conclude this conversation of today.